The night was silent. The snow outside fell in heavy sheets, covering the world in white. The wind howled through the cracks of the old wooden cabin, and the man inside sat close to the fire. He thought the world had nothing left to surprise him. He thought he had seen everything: pain, hunger, loneliness. But that night he was wrong. At first, it was only a sound, a soft knock. 3 gentle taps against the old door. The man froze. Nobody came here. Nobody should have been able to. He lived alone, far from the cities, far from the dangers that still haunted the land. A knock on his door meant trouble or worse. For a long moment, he didn't move. He waited. Listening, the fire cracked. The snowstorm outside screamed louder. Then he heard it. A voice, a whisper. "I can cook. I can clean." The words were not shouted. They were not spoken with force. They were soft, almost broken, like a secret carried on the wind. The man's heart beat faster. A woman's voice, young, trembling yet strong in its own way. He stood slowly, his hand reaching for the old rifle resting against the wall. His mind raced. Was it a trick? A trap? For years, people had learned to be careful. The world outside was not kind. Sometimes the ones who looked weakest were the most dangerous. He moved closer to the door. The voice came again. "I can cook. I can clean. I can be quiet. Please." The word "please" struck him. It was desperate. It was not the voice of an enemy. It was not the voice of someone who came to steal or kill. It was the voice of someone asking, begging for a chance. The man hesitated. His hand touched the door, but did not open it. His mind screamed at him, "Do not trust strangers. Do not open the door. Do not be a fool." Yet his heart whispered something else. What if she truly needs help? What if she has nowhere else to go? Finally, with slow, careful hands, he pulled the wooden door open. Snow rushed in immediately, cold and sharp against his face. And there she was. A girl stood in the storm, her body shivering, her hair black and heavy with snow. Her clothes were torn and rough, made from scraps of fabric and leather. She looked young, but her eyes carried the weight of someone who had seen too much. Her arms were crossed tightly over her chest, not in anger, but to hold herself against the cold. Her lips were pale, but she still managed to whisper. Again, the same words as before. "I can cook. I can clean. I can be quiet." She did not beg for food. She did not beg for safety. She offered herself as if she had no worth beyond her silence, her service. The man looked at her for a long moment. Something inside him twisted. He had seen desperation before, but this was different. This was not just desperation. This was survival. She was asking to exist, nothing more. He stepped back from the door, letting the warm light of the fire spill out into the storm. The girl's eyes widened, as if she could not believe he would allow her in. Slowly, with careful steps, she crossed the threshold. The warmth touched her skin, and she let out a breath she had been holding for too long. The man closed the door behind her, locking out the storm. Still, he did not lower his guard. His rifle stayed close, his eyes sharp. But now, there was another presence in the cabin. A whisper had entered his world, and with it, a mystery he did not understand. The girl did not speak again. She only stood there, dripping with snow, trembling from the cold. She did not look him in the eye, but she did not look afraid either. She looked determined. The firelight revealed more of her, scars on her arms, dirt on her skin. But also something else, strength. Quiet strength, hidden beneath weakness. The man could not explain it, but he felt it. This was no ordinary girl. Her words echoed in his mind, over and over. "I can cook. I can clean." Why had she chosen those words? Why had she chosen those words? Why not ask for food or warmth or safety? Why those promises, as if they were the only things she had to give? He studied her carefully, and in that silence, a thought came to him. His life had been quiet, empty, and predictable. But now, with her standing in his cabin, everything felt different. Something had changed, and deep down he knew it would never be the same again. Outside, the storm raged louder, covering their tracks, hiding them from the world. Inside, two strangers shared the same fire, and though he did not yet understand why, the man knew this night was the beginning of something far greater than himself. The girl stood by the fire, her thin body shaking, steam rising from her wet clothes as the warmth began to touch her frozen skin. She did not sit. She did not move without permission. She stood straight, her hands folded in front of her, like someone who had learned to be invisible. The man watched her closely. His rifle rested on the table, close enough for his hand to reach if he needed it. He was not a man who trusted easily. Years of living alone had taught him that kindness could be dangerous. But there was something about her, something that made him pause. She had whispered those words again when she entered. I can cook, I can clean, I can be quiet. She did not ask for food, though her stomach must have been empty. She did not ask for water, though her lips were cracked and dry. She offered work, service, and silence. That was her price to exist in his cabin. The man cleared his throat. Sit, he said at last, pointing to the old wooden chair near the fire. She moved slowly, carefully, as if afraid to take up too much space. When she sat, she kept her eyes down, staring at the floor, not daring to look at him. What's your name? He asked. There was a long silence. Then, in the same soft whisper, she answered. Lyra. The name lingered in the air. Simple, but heavy with mystery. The man studied her face. She was young, maybe in her 20s, but her eyes looked older. They carried shadows, the kind only suffering could leave behind. Her dark hair was tangled, her skin pale from hunger. Yet, under the scars and dirt, there was beauty. A quiet kind of beauty, like a flower growing through cracks of stone. He poured her a small cup of hot broth from the pot hanging over the fire. She took it with both hands, holding it close but not drinking until he nodded. Only then did she sip slowly, carefully, as if every drop was precious. The man leaned back, arms crossed. Where did you come from? Lyra hesitated. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Her hands tightened around the cup. Finally, she shook her head. Far. She whispered, too far. Her answer only deepened the mystery. The fire crackled, filling the silence between them. Outside, the storm roared, but inside the cabin, there was only the sound of her quiet breathing. The man spoke again, his voice calm but firm. Why here? Why me? This time, she lifted her eyes just enough to meet his. For a brief second, he saw something there. Not fear, not weakness, but determination. She whispered, because you opened the door. The answer struck him harder than he expected. Simple words, yet heavy with meaning. He looked at her again, more carefully this time. The way she sat, the way she spoke, the way she kept herself. Small but strong, she reminded him of someone hiding in plain sight. Someone running from something far greater than hunger or cold. And he realized then, she wasn't just desperate. She was hiding. The man said nothing for a while. He let her eat, he let her warm by the fire. But his mind raced. Who was she running? From what danger followed her? And why did she believe silence and service were enough to buy safety? Later, when the storm outside grew quieter, he gave her a blanket. She took it, clutching it to her chest like treasure. She whispered again, thank you, and curled near the fire. But the man did not sleep. He watched her, eyes sharp, mind restless. And then he noticed something strange. Even as she slept, her lips moved. Faint whispers escaped, too soft to understand, like a language he had never heard before. Her breathing stayed calm, but the words continued, flowing like a hidden song. He leaned closer, straining to hear. The sounds were unlike any human tongue he knew. Smooth, rhythmic, filled with strange tones. It was not just talking, it was communication. A chill ran through him, and it wasn't from the cold. She had told him her name. She had promised silence. But even in her sleep, she whispered secrets into the darkness. The man leaned back, staring at her as the fire burned low. His grip tightened on the rifle again, though he did not move. One thought kept circling in his mind, refusing to leave. She isn't just a stranger. She's something else. The cabin was quiet the next morning. The storm outside had slowed, leaving the world covered in deep white snow. The man stepped outside for a moment, his boots sinking into the frozen ground. He checked for tracks, for signs that anyone else had been near, but the storm had wiped everything clean. The girl's arrival was hidden, as if she had appeared from nowhere. Inside, Lyra was awake. She had already cleaned the small table, arranged the few items in the cabin neatly, and swept the wooden floor with a rough broom. She worked silently, without being asked. When the man stepped back inside, he paused. He hadn't told her to. "Do any of this? You didn't need to," he said. His voice, even Lyra, kept her eyes low. "You let me stay," she whispered. "I must do something." The man studied her. She moved with quiet grace, every step careful, her presence almost weightless. She seemed determined to make herself useful. Yet there was something in her silence that made him uneasy. Later, as the fire warmed the cabin, the man noticed again what he had seen the night before. Her lips moved faintly, her breath shaping sounds too soft for him to catch. At first, he thought she was praying. But no prayer he knew sounded like that. He leaned closer one evening, pretending to fix something near the fire. The words that slipped from her lips were not human. Smooth, flowing syllables. A language he had never heard. The sounds carried rhythm, as if each whisper was part of a larger message. The man's heart tightened. Who was she speaking to? Night, he could not sleep. The girl lay near the fire, her face calm, her body finally resting. But even in sleep, her lips moved, whispering words that seemed to vanish into the air. The firelight flickered across her face, revealing the faintest trace of a smile. The man sat in his chair, rifle across his knees, staring into the flames. His thoughts twisted like smoke. She was human, he could see that. But her whispers carried something otherworldly. Something hidden. The next morning, he asked, "What do you say when you whisper?" Her hands froze on the cup of broth she held. For a moment, she didn't answer. Then her eyes lifted to meet his. They were dark, deep, and sharp eyes that carried secrets. "I talk to myself," she said softly. It was a lie. He could hear it in her tone, see it in the way her fingers tightened around the cup. "Those words," he said firmly, "they are not from here." Her gaze lowered again. Silence filled the room. He leaned forward. "What are you hiding?" For a long time, Lyra did not speak. The fire cracked. The wind pressed against the walls of the cabin, and still she stayed quiet. Then, finally, she whispered, "If I tell you, you will send me away." The man's chest tightened. He said nothing, waiting. She drew in a slow breath. "I promised you I can be silent, because silence is what keeps me alive. If I speak too much, they will hear me." The man's eyes narrowed. "Who?" Her lips trembled, but she did not answer. Instead, she placed the empty cup down and stood, her small frame straight, her voice steady now. "I clean, I cook. I stay quiet. That is the promise I made. That is why I am still alive." The man felt a chill, deeper than the snow outside. Whoever they were, she feared them more than the storm, more than hunger, more than death itself. That night, as he lay in his bed, he did not sleep again. He listened. He listened to her faint whispers, the language unknown to him, flowing like water through the cabin's silence. Sometimes her tone shifted as if answering an invisible voice. Sometimes her whispers carried sadness, sometimes anger. He realized then she was not only talking, she was communicating. But to who? Thought burned in his mind until morning. When he rose, she was already awake, already working. She moved quickly, quietly, her face calm. But he could not unsee the truth he now felt. She was not just a girl begging for a chance to serve. She was something else. Something hidden. And as he watched her brush the floor, her lips moving again. In faint whispers, he knew one thing with certainty. Her silence was not silence at all. It was a mask behind it lived secrets that could change everything. The days passed slowly, each one colder than the last. Snow piled high against the cabin walls, and the outside world seemed far away. Inside, the man and the girl shared silence. She worked as she promised. She cooked simple meals, she cleaned every corner of the cabin, and she never asked for anything more than warmth from the fire. But at night, the whispers continued. The man pretended to sleep, but his eyes stayed half open. He listened. The strange words flowed like streams of water, smooth and constant. Sometimes her tone was gentle, almost like a lullaby. Other times, sharp and urgent, like a warning. The sounds were not random. They carried meaning, he was sure of it. One night, curiosity overcame him.
Oh.
When the girl curled near the fire, her lips moving again, he rose silently from his bed. He moved closer, careful not to make the floorboards creak. Her voice was faint, but clear, speaking in that strange tongue. Then, to his shock, he heard a reply. A whisper so soft it seemed to come from the air itself. The man froze. His blood turned cold. The girl wasn't talking to herself. She was communicating. He leaned closer, straining to hear. Her words shifted in tone, almost as if she argued with the unseen voice. Her brow tightened, her fingers gripped the blanket. Then, suddenly, she stopped. Her eyes opened. They met his dot for a long moment. Neither spoke. The fire cracked, shadows danced across the cabin walls, and her whispering lips stilled. "You shouldn't listen," she said at last. Her voice barely more than breath. The man stepped back, his hand brushing against the rifle leaning by the DeVoe. "Wall, who are you speaking to?" he demanded. Her gaze did not leave his. Her dark eyes seemed deeper than ever, filled with secrets and quiet fear. "If I tell you," she whispered, "you won't let me stay." "You promised silence," the man said coldly. "Yet you speak to something." She lowered her head. For the first time since she arrived, she looked weak, fragile. Her hands trembled as she whispered, "They are searching. I must answer, or they will find me faster." The man's jaw tightened. "Who?" For a moment, she said nothing. Then, slowly, she spoke the word. "Aliens." The sound of it filled the cabin, heavier than thunder. The man's grip tightened on the rifle. His mind swirled. He had heard stories, rumors of creatures that had once taken humans, studied them, enslaved them. But no one truly spoke of it. Anymore? Was she mad? Or worse, was she a lure? A trap to draw him out? She saw the doubt in his eyes. "I was taken," she whispered. "Many of us were. They do not believe humans are strong. They call us weak. Tools, shadows. But I escaped." Her voice trembled, but her eyes hardened. "And now? They want me back." The man's breath came slow, heavy. He wanted to call her a liar. He wanted to push her out into the storm and forget this madness. But deep down, he knew. He had heard whispers before. Tales of humans disappearing, never to return. And now, one sat in his cabin, whispering in a language not of Earth. "Why here?" he asked, his voice sharp. Lyra lifted her chin. "Because you opened the door. Because you gave me fire. Because you still believe a stranger can be human." The words struck him. She was more than just desperate. She was a survivor. She was proof of something greater. But the danger was real. What she said was true, if they were searching. Then they would come. The man stared at her, his thoughts torn. His life had been quiet, hidden, safe. But with this girl, that safety was broken. "I should send you away," he muttered. Her eyes softened, and for the first time, her whisper carried something more than survival. "If you send me away, they will find me. And when they find me, they will find you too." The fire burned low, filling the silence with crackling sparks. The man's chest tightened. He had opened the door once. And somehow, he knew he could not close it again. The girl sat back, her face pale in the firelight. "You asked who I whisper to," she said softly. "Now you know." He gripped the rifle, staring into the flames. The world outside was frozen and silent. But inside the cabin, a storm had already begun, and for the first time in years, the man realized his life was no longer his own. The cabin felt smaller now. The fire still burned, the snow still pressed against the walls. But the air between the man and the girl was heavy with unspoken words. She sat by the fire, her hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the flames. He stood across from her, rifle close, thoughts running wild. He wanted to demand answers, but something in her quiet expression stopped him. She would speak, but only when she was ready. At last, Lyra broke the silence. Her voice was steady now, but soft, like someone carrying the weight of too many memories. "They came from the sky," she whispered. "Not in ships of fire and warlike in stories. They came quiet, like hunters. They did not want to destroy. They wanted to take." The man's jaw tightened. He said nothing, letting her continue. "They saw us as less," she said. "Not enemies, not equals. Tools." Her eyes lifted briefly, sharp with pain. "To them, humans are not dangerous. We are not powerful. We are only useful. Hands to work, voices to stay silent. Bodies to endure. Nothing more." Her words cut deep, and the man felt anger rise in his chest. He had lived a life of struggle, yet pride had always carried him. To hear that some creature from the stars saw humanity as nothing more than tools, it burned inside him. Lyra's hands trembled, but she kept speaking. "They put us in cages, not chains, not prison cages of the mind. They told us to obey, and if we obeyed, we were fed. If we resisted, we were punished. Some broke quickly. Some never spoke again. They made us believe silence was the only way to survive." Her eyes lowered. "That is why I promised you. Cook, clean, be quiet. It is what they taught us. It is how I lived long enough to escape." The man swallowed hard. Her whispers were no longer just strange words, they were scars. Scars left not on her body, but on her spirit. "How did you get away?" he asked. Lyra's voice softened, almost fading. "I listened when they thought I was silent. I learned their words, their signals. I watched the guards. I waited. One night when they changed shifts, I ran. The snow covered my trail. The storm carried my scent. I ran until I could not stand. I thought I would die in the cold, until I found your door." Her gaze lifted again, steady now. "That is the truth. I was taken, I escaped, and now they hunt me." The man's chest felt heavy. He believed her, though part of him wished he didn't. If she spoke the truth, then the danger was greater than he imagined. He looked at her long and hard. Why come to me? Why not keep running? Lyra hesitated. For a moment, her mask of calm cracked, and he saw the fear underneath. "Because you opened the door," she whispered. "And because I cannot fight them alone." The fire popped, sending sparks into the air. The man felt his grip tighten on the rifle. He had lived alone for years, safe in his silence. He never asked for this. But now it had come to him, whether he wanted it or not. Lyra leaned closer to the fire, her face half lit, half shadowed. "They believe humans are weak," she said, her voice sharp now, filled with quiet defiance. "But they are wrong. Weak creatures do not survive storms. Weak creatures do not rise after pain. Weak creatures do not whisper in silence while planning to fight." For the first time since she arrived, her words carried strength. Not the strength of muscle or weapons, but something deeper. The strength to endure. The man stared at her, and in that moment, he understood. Her whispers were not just survival. They were rebellion. Every quiet word she spoke in that strange tongue was a weapon, hidden beneath the mask of silence. "They will come," she said firmly. "Maybe tomorrow, maybe weeks from now, but they will not stop. And when they find me, they will find you too. You must choose now. Will you send me out into the snow? Or will you stand with me?" Her words echoed in the small cabin. The man's heart pounded. He thought of the life he had lived, lone, quiet, safe, but empty. He thought of her, fragile yet unbroken, whispering against giants. Slowly, he lowered the rifle. His voice was low, but steady. "If they come, they will regret opening my door." Lyra's lips curved not into a smile, but into something close. Relief, hope. The firelight flickered across their faces, and outside, the storm began to ease. But deep in the shadows of the night sky, unseen eyes were searching. The hunters would not stop, and when they came, they would learn the truth she already knew. Humans were not weak. Humans were not tools. Humans were special. The night stretched long and restless. The fire burned low, throwing long shadows across the cabin walls. The man sat in silence, his rifle resting against his knees, his eyes never leaving the girl. She sat curled near the fire, blanket wrapped around her, whispering in that strange tongue again. But now, the man no longer thought of those whispers as weakness. He heard them as weapons, quiet blades hidden in the dark. Still, his chest felt heavy. He knew what her words meant. Danger was coming. And if she was right, it would not come slowly. By morning, the storm outside had cleared. The world was bright, the snow glittering under pale sunlight. For a moment, the land looked peaceful. Untouched, almost beautiful. But the man's instincts told him otherwise. The silence was too deep. The air carried something sharp. "They are closer," Lyra whispered when she stepped outside. Her eyes scanned the sky, the tree line, the hills covered in white. "Can feel them?" The man tightened his grip on the rifle. How her lips pressed together. "When they speak, even across distance, I hear them. Not with ears, with memory." The man frowned. He wanted to ask more, but he stopped. Kay realized. Some truths could not be explained. They could only be endured. Back inside, he began to move with purpose. He pulled open drawers, checked old supplies, counted the bullets left in his box. Each one felt too few. He sharpened the hunting knife, set traps by the door, and closed every crack where cold air could creep in. Lyra watched him quietly. "You are preparing to fight," she whispered. He glanced at her. "What else is there? If you are right, they will come. And if they come, I cannot run. Not anymore." She nodded, her expression calm, but her eyes heavy with sadness. "They are stronger than you know. Their weapons burn, their voices command. They do not fear one man with a rifle." "Maybe not," the man said, loading a bullet into the chamber with a sharp click. "But they should." Lyra lowered her gaze. "If you stand with me, you will not live as you did before. Your life will change. There will be no more peace, no more silence." The man let out a breath. "Peace ended the night you knocked on my door." The words hung between them. For the first time, Lyra looked at him not as a stranger, but as something more. A choice had been made, and it bound them both. As the sun fell and night returned, the air grew heavier. Lyra's whispers came more often now, her lips moving faster, her voice sharp. The man could not understand the language, but he felt the urgency in her tone. She was answering calls, deflecting signals, slowing the hunters. But it was only a matter of time. At last, she stopped whispering and looked at him with tired eyes. "They are near. Tomorrow, maybe sooner." The man nodded. He did not tremble, though his hands were tight around the rifle. Fear lived in his chest, but so did resolve. That night, neither of them slept. They sat by the fire, the silence between them heavy but alive. Sometimes she whispered softly, not in her strange tongue, but in words he understood. "You think humans are strong?" she asked suddenly. He turned to her. "I know we are." Her lips curved slightly. "Then prove it. Not to me, to them." The firelight caught her face, and for the first time, he saw not only fear in her eyes, but defiance. She was no longer just a broken girl asking for a chance to serve. She was something more, a survivor, carrying the voice of all who had been. Silenced before her, the man tightened his jaw. He understood. The choice was no longer only his. It was theirs. Together, outside, the night was cold, the sky black and endless. But somewhere beyond the stars, something was watching. Something was moving closer. The man rose and checked the door, the windows, the traps, one last time. He stood tall, his rifle firm in his hands. Lyra stood too, pulling the blanket tight around her shoulders, whispering once more in that alien tongue. But this time, the whispers were not desperate. They were sharp, cutting, like a blade drawn from its sheath. She turned to him and whispered, "When they come, do not fear. Fear is what they expect." He met her eyes, and for the first time, he believed. She was not just a girl who had survived. She was proof of something greater, that humans endure, adapt, and rise. And when the hunters came, they would face not silence, not weakness, but humanity itself. The night was too quiet. No wind, no snow. Only silence heavy enough to press on the cabin walls. The man felt it in his chest. The storm had not ended. It had only moved to the sky. Lyra sat near the fire, whispering again, her voice faster than before. Her eyes darted to the windows, to the door, to the ceiling. Finally, she stopped and looked at him. "They are here." The man tightened his grip on the rifle. He had heard stories of hunters in the forest, of wolves that circled prey in silence. But this silence was worse. This was the silence of something that did not fear. A low hum shook the air, deep and unnatural. The ground trembled under the cabin floor. Outside, faint lights glowed beyond the trees, white, sharp, cutting through the night like knives. The man's breath slowed. His heartbeat steadied. He had made his choice. There was no turning back. The first sound came suddenly, a metallic thud on the roof, like claws digging into wood. Then another, and another. Shadows moved outside, tall and sharp. Figures circled. The cabin, their movements smooth, unnatural. The door rattled. The windows shook. Then a voice, deep and commanding, echoed from everywhere at once. "Return the girl." The words were not shouted. They were spoken with certainty, with power, as if refusal was impossible. Lyra's body stiffened, but her chin lifted. "Do not answer," she whispered to the man. "They feed on fear." The man raised his rifle, his eyes locked on the door. His voice was steady. "This is my home. No one leaves unless I say so." The cabin shuddered as something struck the door. Once, twice, a third time. Cracks spread across the wood. The man's finger tightened on the trigger. The door burst open. The figure that stepped inside was tall, its limbs too long, its skin pale and glistening under the firelight. Its eyes glowed faintly, its face stretched, smooth, without expression. It did not carry a weapon, it did not need one. Its presence alone was power. The alien's gaze moved to Lyra. She stood, blanket falling from her shoulders, her lips moving quickly. The strange language poured from her mouth, faster, sharper than before. The alien froze for a moment, tilting its head as if listening. Then the man fired. The rifle cracked, the sound exploding through the cabin. The bullet struck the alien's shoulder, staggered but did not fall. Black liquid oozed from the wound, steaming as it touched the air. The alien turned its gaze on him, expressionless, but its eyes glowed brighter. The man felt a pressure. In his mind, a voice pushing into his thoughts. Weak, human. Obey. He gritted his teeth and shouted aloud, "No," and fired again. The cabin filled with smoke and sound. The alien stumbled back. Outside, more shadows moved, but Lyra's whispers grew louder, sharper, cutting through the pressure in the man's mind. "Stand," she cried suddenly, in his language now. "Do not kneel. They do not understand strength if you hide it." The man roared, firing again and again, each shot shaking the cabin. The alien fell to one knee, black liquid pooling around it. Its glowing eyes dimmed outside. The others did not enter. They watched. They waited. Lyra stepped forward, her voice rising. She shouted in their language, her words strong, commanding. The air trembled with her defiance. The man could not understand, but he knew what she was saying. She was telling them the truth, that humans were not tools, that humans were not silent, that humans could fight. For a long moment, the forest was still. Then, slowly, the lights beyond the trees began to fade. The shadows withdrew. The humming sound weakened until it was gone. Silence returned. But it was not the same silence. This silence was victory. The man lowered his rifle, his hands trembling for the first time. The alien on the floor was still, its body fading into ash-like dust. Lyra stood over it, her chest rising and falling, her face fierce and unbroken. Finally, she turned to him. Her voice was soft again, but steady. "Now they know." He looked at her, the firelight reflecting in his tired eyes. "Know what?" Lips curved into the faintest smile. That humans are not weak, that humans endure, that humans fight, that humans are special. The words sank deep into him. He had lived so long in silence, believing his life was small and forgotten. But now, standing with her, he felt something he had not felt in years. Pride. He glanced at the broken door, at the snow outside, at the empty night sky. He knew this was not the end. The aliens would return. They would come again, stronger, angrier. But when they did, they would remember this night, and they would fear. The man tightened his grip on the rifle one last time, then set it aside. He looked at Lyra, her face calm, her eyes bright with quiet fire. His life was no longer silent. His life was no longer empty. His life had changed the moment she whispered at his door. Together, they had shown the truth. Humans were HFY. Humans were special.